Hi, it's Andy.
Hi, it's Dave.
Hi, it's Kirk.
Welcome to the ADK channel, and today we are going to be talking about the album by Obituary that's just come out. We say it's the new album, but it actually came out about, a week ago?
13th of January, Friday.
Okay, so it's been out 5 days, which has given us enough time to have a listen to it. It's Dying of Everything, and we're going to give you our kind of concise views and thoughts on it. I think we should kick off with Andy to give us your first impressions of the brand new album. All over to you, Andy.
First impressions, yeah, what you'd expect from Obituary. I mean, I'm a massive fan. Let's get that out there straight away. I tape traded the Execution demos, before the first album, so I've followed their career, and it's an Obituary album. You know what you're going to get. There's nothing too sort of different from anything they've ever released before. But yeah, it's a strong album. It's not my favourite. I'll put that out there as well. It hasn't got the consistency of not just Obituary albums, but other albums in the genre where you love absolutely every single track. There are some that are a little bit filler for me, to be honest, but kicks off really strongly. Barely Alive is an absolutely blistering track. They don't often start fast. Sometimes there's like a sort of an intro of sorts, not necessarily a musical intro, but a sort of sample sort of sound, in introducing the album. They get straight into the first song, and it's a little different from a lot of Obituary songs as well. I thought, is this setting a new sort of style for the band? It's a sort of, perhaps a strange one to open. I thought they'd have opened with the sort of like the lead song, which is the second one, at the wrong time. We've had a look at the music video for this one, and that does have the sort of standard Obituary sort of sampled intro before the song kicks in, and it's sort of like the slow classic Obituary song with a single, it's got the sing-along chorus, so they've got the sort of catchy, memorable sort of main riff, and it goes on. I mean, I prefer the sort of slower Obituary songs, to be honest, like the next one, which is called Without a Conscience. It's got the chugging riffs, it's got open string riffs. It's another good one. A quote that I read from one of the bands regarding this album is, we'll let other bands get down to the technical stuff and the good riffs, 6,000 riffs in one song. We'll just keep it groovy. That pretty much sums them up, because it is fairly simple stuff. It's not too much of a departure from the very first album or any of the ones they've done in the last 20 or so years. It's become apparent in this one as well, and Kirk, you'll chip in on this either now or at the end, but John Tardy seems to have adopted this Tom G. Warrior death grunt thing.
Yeah. You're talking about the song Weaponize the Hate, where he does the death grunt 3 times.
Well, that's probably the most populated one, yeah. It featured quite a bit in the 2017 self-titled as well. I mean, I first heard it obviously when they done the cover of Circle of the Tyrants. I don't think I can recall many more occasions, but the last 2 albums he certainly sort of introduced that into his vocal style. The cover, we'll talk about the cover while I've got it on my notes here. I think is a really cracking illustration. I recognised it straight away. I wasn't 100%, but I did check. But it's I'm going to check my glasses on this one. It's a guy called Mariusz Lewandowski, and I recognise it from the same style of artwork from Bell Witch's classic Mirror Reaper album, which came out 4 or 5 years ago. Very similar style. Unfortunately, this may well be his last sort of album cover that we all see, because he passed away last year, but it's a really good album cover. Not quite sure it demonstrates exactly the content or the album title, but it's a really cracking illustration. Looks great on the t-shirts and whatever. You mentioned that's Weaponized to Hate. The next one is War, which I think is 2023's Redneck Stomp. It's got that sort of probably about 2 riffs, quite simplistic. It's got a bit more sort of vocalization than the Redneck Stomp. That might become like a live favourite. The title track is another fast one. One thing I didn't like on this was, I don't know if you picked up on this, the sort of the cheesy demonic voice that sort of occurs halfway through, which was popularised by sort of Destruction and Onslaught in the 80s, and Slayer. It just didn't seem to fit. and I'm surprised that was included. The next few songs, these are the fillers for me. They seem a bit sort of standard, not a lot about them in my view. Unmemorable, unremarkable. But the end track, Be Warned, is sort of like a sort of doomy, slower track and good one to finish off. But it's, as I say, it's not the best Obituary album in my opinion. There are songs that I will skip, but there are some absolute bangers. You know, the top one for me is the lead single track, The Wrong Time, sing along chorus, simple classic Obituary riff. You know, that should have been the album opener for me, and that's the sort of flag bearer of the tracks on this album.
Andy, let me ask you a question. You mentioned the last song, Be Warned.
Yeah.
That's the only track on the album that you could almost call Death Doom. Now, Death Doom as a genre is really associated with England, isn't it? And Peaceful Records, Paradise Lost, My Dying Bride, Anathema. And Obituary are never mentioned in that. Yet they were the main death metal band from Florida that played mid-tempo and with slower moments. So my question is, do you think Obituary deserve more credit for their influence on that hybrid of death metal and doom metal? And does that last song encapsulate that?
I think so, yeah. I mean, another band you could chuck in that hat would be Autopsy as well. You know, like Obituary, it's their slower tracks, their slower passages that I prefer. That, you know, that almost, you know, yeah, let's say doom death, rather than sort of like the faster death metal that they occasionally sort of step into. You know, that's both bands. So yeah, you're absolutely right. When you're talking about death doom, it is those British bands that you mentioned, rather than the likes of sort of Autopsy and Obituary. Maybe because there's sort of like the gore element to their material and their lyrics, you know, that kind of perhaps takes them away from that genre and maybe doesn't put them in the same camp as of early Anathema, My Dying Bride, Paradise Lost, and the like.
Yeah, do you know, I haven't looked at it from that. That might be the reason. Yeah, like you say, it could be the themes and the lyrics and the imagery. Certainly, you don't have that in the English death doom scene, do you, of the early 90s? Yeah, just wanted to pick up on that. Dave, go on. What did you think of this then? This album?
Okay, so
you're quite familiar with Obituary, aren't you?
I say that you'd say that, but actually, I'm not familiar with the band massively. But I'm familiar with Cause of Death. That's the album I'm kind of familiar with, and then I haven't listened to Obituary in 20 years. But I was really looking forward to this. But the probably reason why I'm looking forward to this is because of all the videos that we've all been reacting to. So it's been giving me a lot more exposure back into kind of the more heavier stuff. So when this was announced that they were going to do a new album, I was like, great, can't wait to see what this is going to be. And before I get into the actual individual tracks, so I've done exactly what Andy's done. I've gone track by track. I listened to the album kind of very briefly as a one-off listen, headphones on, just doing some bits and bobs, and really liked the album on like cursory listen, but without actually breaking the tracks down. Then I went back and broke down the tracks. But one of the things about Obituary is I put them alongside about 4 or 5 other bands where when you hear that guitar tone, you know it's Obituary. There are a few other bands when you hear their guitar tone, they've got such a distinctive guitar tone, you know it's them. Entombed is another band. When you hear the kind of guitar riffs off of Entombed, you're like, is this Entombed that we're listening to? Megadeth have got it's the shrill of the Megadeth riffs, you know it's Megadeth. Not that many metal bands have a distinctive guitar tone, but for me, Obituary is one of those ones that when it comes on, and I think you had one of those guess challenges, and it was the only song I could guess was when that Obituary one came on, because I was like, that's Obituary's guitar tone, I know exactly who that is. And it's quite great. For me, it's the fact they've continued that on every album. He's got his tone, he's dialed it in, he knows what works, and it's almost like a signature of their actual sound. But let's get to the album. Okay, so yeah, Barely Alive opening the album, great powerful opener, real statement of intent for me. Interestingly, when it first came on, I wasn't looking at it on my phone, and I thought it was Slayer. Yes. I genuinely thought the song sounded like Slayer. And I was just like, hang on, am I on the right album? Is this not Slayer I'm listening to? And I was like, oh, okay, it's Obituary, but it does sound very much like Slayer. And I didn't have a problem with that, but I had to double check because it's like Obituary doing a Slayer cover for me. In a way, so I was like, okay, not bad, liked it. enjoyed the solos, enjoyed the vocals across it. Easy to get straight into track. So I really like that. The Wrong Time, we did the single, probably the standout track for the album for me. It's the one that just got the hook, that the dig it down, dig it down, dig it down, dig it down. Great riff. As we said when we did the reaction, it's one of those riffs that me and Andy could probably, and yourself, Kirk, could just pick up a guitar and just start playing it. But it's such a great riff. It hooks you straight in. And actually, weirdly, I don't know if we said it at the time, but it's such a prong riff as well.
Yes, definitely. It's the slide, isn't it? The only moment where that sounds quintessentially Obituary is when they do that descending chromatic pattern that goes do 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 do
yeah
do do do. Everything else, even the crisp production of it, it's almost got like a beat, dance beat to it, hasn't it? You know, with
it's very.
It
wasn't what I expected. Going back to now think about Obituary, but I really enjoyed it. It was very accessible track. Without Conscience, I actually put this down. So I actually thought this could have been a Hatebreed track. There is some hardcore elements in this particular track. If you imagined it being played by a band like Hatebreed, you could go, yeah, that's a hardcore riff that they're playing. Again, really enjoyed that element. Going into War, the One-esque Metallica 1 intro style with the machine guns and the explosions, etc. Good build up. It's almost got new metal influences in that track. So if you're into new metal and you actually start thinking about new metal riffs, they are new metal riffs that he's actually playing in there, the chords. And I know how much you hate new metal, but they are new metal riffs, and I would definitely put that in there. You could, if you just put like I wouldn't say it, but Jonathan Davis's vocals on there, you could do that as a new metal song. That's going to really annoy Obituary fans, by the way. He's saying that.
It's like you're unintentionally accusing the band of selling out.
Yeah, they sold out. Dying of Everything for me is the first track that actually reminds me of older Obituary. So that was the first one where I was like, whereas, because as you notice, as I was going through this, I've sort of said, reminds me of Slayer, reminded me of Prong, reminded me of Hatebreed. It was the first one where it went, it doesn't remind me of any other band. Now, what's interesting is a lot of these bands came in, apart from Slayer, but a lot of these bands came in after Obituary. So it may be that these bands have borrowed elements of Obituary into their bands, and then Obituary are now just borrowing those back, or that they were existing within Obituary as well. Because I haven't listened to loads and loads of Obituary albums, so I can't tell if some of these elements were on previous albums, etc.
What did you think of the second half of the album then? Let's spare our viewers going through track by track.
Okay, I'm going to go quick.
What did you think of the second half of the album?
My Will to Live, dated death metal, I thought almost Samael in nature, I thought. But not quite as good.
I'll just jump in and say, I noted down, I've got to say, sort of that particular song, My Will to Live, was reminding me of, By the Dawn, I'm jumping in ahead, Scream Bloody Gore, Era Death. That's the next one, Dave, By the Dawn.
I put that down, Ferocious Double Kicking, classic Obituary riffs. Weaponize the Hate sounds like Entombed on speed. To me. Torn Apart had some great new wave of British heavy metal galloping drum beats. Really liked that element. Was it Be Warned?
Yeah, what do you think of Be Warned? Because I asked Andy about that. To me, that's a lot different to every other song on this album.
Be Warned was the second best song on the album, in my opinion, after the single.
Really?
I loved it. I picked out dark, doomy, but with groove, and I really liked that. So weirdly, the second best song for me on the album was the doom-esque track. For me, in summary, for non-death metal heads, it's gonna feel a bit samey. If you're not really into death metal, the album is gonna feel samey, and it's gonna feel like there is a few highs, but it's gonna kind of start to blend together. But I think if you spend the time and actually go through the tracks, even if you're just into metal in any shape or form and spend the time, there is some real quality gold tracks in there, but there are a few tracks that could be taken or leaving. It's not an album which has got 100% gold all the way through. There are some set or sort of filler tracks in there, but if you're into the groove stuff, or if you're into like me, I'll pick out maybe the ones that sound a bit more prongy, or the Hatebreed ones versus the ones that might be the more traditional Obituary style.
Yeah, can I pick up on 2 points that you both made there as well? It ties in. So Andy, you were talking about the opening song, Barely Alive. Took you by surprise, didn't it, because of the tempo? And Dave, you thought it reminded you of mid-80s Slayer.
Yeah.
I agree. But to me, turn that on its head. You have this curious phenomenon where modern hardcore bands now sound like Obituary. So when I did a review of this for Scream Blast Repeat, I said, Obituary are not a hardcore band, but most modern hardcore bands sound like Obituary. And obviously Slayer as well, aren't they? If you look at modern hardcore, Slayer and Obituary are basically the main influences now certainly on metallic hardcore. So that just reminded me of that. You're right. There's a real good thrust, isn't there, to the opening song? It's sludgy. You could almost imagine Napalm Death doing that. You know, if they were to write a crust punk song, it might sound like that as well. So I really like the intro. To me, like the classic debut, Slowly We Rot, I think the first 5 tracks on this are sensational, supremely enjoyable. I really did enjoy Without a Conscience. I think that's got real groove to it as well. You're right, and that's what's unique, isn't it, about Obituary? And that quote that you've just mentioned earlier on, Andy, that sums up their approach. But let's not forget as well, Trevor Perez and Kenny Andrews, they really want to be riff lords, don't they? They're right. You don't need 60 riffs in one song using the most obscure dissonant chords when you can just step on the distortion pedal. I think they're probably only playing in drop D. They don't even down tune that much, do they? They're playing your standard 5th chords. They're quite easy, the fret shapes, but they're memorable riffs, aren't they? And what you get on this album are the 2 things that have always made them distinctive. John Tardy's unique vocal exhalation growl. He invented that, and everyone rips it off, and I understand why. And then let's not forget Donald Tardy, his brother on drums, the double kick footwork, the groove. That is quintessential Obituary, isn't it? They're known for that. Yeah. And that really comes through, like that 1992 album, The Incomplete, which is their biggest selling album, which shifted 250,000 units. Let's not forget, this is death metal. So that was impressive, that they were shifting numbers like that in their heyday. And then when I say in their heyday, I think we've taken this band for granted. I agree, Andy. I don't think that 2017 self-titled had its moments, didn't it? But I think this is a much stronger album. The only thing that lets this down is, you're right, Dave, the second half, you kind of know what to expect with some of these songs. However, I think this is a good gateway band if you want to get into death metal. Before you get to the likes of Cryptopsy, and Deeds of Flesh, this is a good band to get into, to prepare you for that brutal death metal genre, because Obituary, you've got elements of doom in there, a lot of groove, and then obviously you've got the vocals where it sounds like he's ruptured his spleen and he's spewing up his guts, and that's so iconic, isn't it? There's a song on there called My Will to Live. I don't think it achieved its potential. Andy, I think that's the one as well you might be talking about that probably reminds you of Death, Scream, Bloody Gore. It's got a harmonic minor riff, which is very similar to that middle eight of Metallica's Creeping Death. And they don't really do much with it. They have it in the intro and then don't go anywhere with it. Weaponize the Hate. Really love that song. You're right. There's 3 death grunts in there. Homage to Celtic Frost. What can I ask both of you? What did you think, of the title track, Dying of Everything?
What did I write again? To me, just a classic death metal track. It was the first track on the album that sounded like Obituary to me. But I didn't write any notes about any part of that song that stood out. It just said it sounds like an Obituary track. It sounds like a classic death metal song. But it didn't have any of the other elements where I felt that they had either were inspired by or borrowed from or had other elements of other styles. They just went pure death metal to me.
What did you write down, Andy, for the title track?
Just the negatives about the demonic samples, but yeah, like you, Dave, it's a sort of a standard Obituary track with the open chugging riffs, but by far not one of their best, in my opinion, and certainly not good enough to be. Maybe they like the title enough to sort of put that onto the album as well, but it's not the strongest track on this album for me.
Yeah, I actually did like it. I'll tell you why. It's one of the few songs where you can hear Terry Butler's bass. I don't think the bass is loud enough in the mix because of that sludgy guitar tone. It drowns out the bottom end and you don't really hear the bass guitar. But on that song, it starts with like your thrash metal double timing beats, doesn't it? You've got these chugs, and then you've just got this distorted bass filling in the gaps. I really enjoyed that. I just think that Terry Butler, they probably could have turned him up in the mix. Especially, you know, this is a band that concentrate on groove, so you should be able to pick out the bass and the drums, shouldn't you, in the music, even with headphones, and I struggle at times.
I would say about the mixes on my headphones were really good. So I heard the bass all the way through. Now, it might be the hardest problem now is when they used to mix albums 20, 30 years ago, it was a much easier element because you only had to worry about car speakers, stereo systems, and some form of headphones. Now you've got to do things like AirPods, Beats headphones, you've got studio headphones, and they all have different bass frequencies. They've all got different elements, which means it may sound great on one set of headphones, and then someone puts a bass heavy headphones on and it distorts like crazy. And so they're trying to make this balance where if you've got an AirPod in your ear or you've got a bass heavy one, you will get a balanced mix, so it won't overly distort. But unfortunately what that does mean is on certain elements, like on AirPods for instance, that bass is going to be non-existent, but you'll be able to hear the song, whereas on something like Beats headphones it's going to be a lot heavier on the bass but not overly distorted. So yeah, there's certain elements like that probably.
I just think they could have turned it up though, because Obituary are not a band that use high treble settings for their guitars, are they? You know, like everyone thinks of Metallica and Justice for All as that great guitar tone, but you can't hear the bass obviously on the album. This one, they can afford to turn it so that it's showing red at the mixing desk, like that contemporary death metal band Undeath.
Yeah.
They do that, and it's really fuzzy, and it almost hurts your ears when you listen to it, but that's the intended effect. I think Obituary could easily do that, and it would not in any way ruin the music, because this is ugly music. Let's not forget, even that song The Wrong Time, it almost starts like a stadium rock song, but it's defiled by the ugly negative outlook of death metal, isn't it? That's what I love about it. You know, you can raise the face, play the air guitar, but then when you listen to the vocals, you're thinking, yeah, this is never going to be played on the radio.
Just never ask us to get you to mix our albums then, okay?
Yeah. Well, look, there's certain artists you couldn't do that with, could you? But I think this is one where you can just say, forget what the manual
Here's the
says.
idea. When
When
it's clipping and it's in the red, that's not a good sign, Kirk.
No, I know it's not.
Just letting you know.
Not with audio, but with musically, you can do it with certain bands. Napalm Death are another one. You can do that with them. It wouldn't have a detrimental effect. So, yeah, in conclusion, I think I'm probably the most positive on this, probably because I know Obituary from the debut album up until that 1994 album, World Demise. Then they split in 97, I think, Andy, didn't they? And then returned. And I never really listened to much of the 2000s work until that self-titled album. So this has got me back into them and reminded me that they are riff lords. You know, it rocks out, which is unusual for a death metal album. So I highly positive for me. I don't know if I can say it was better than I was expecting, because you kind of know what to expect, as you said, Andy, don't you?
Okay, well, let's do our usual scoring. So we have a four-tier scoring system. So it's either a bid it, a trade it, a stream it, or a buy it. As always, we kick to Andy first. So Andy, what's your scoring on the door?
Buy it.
We have a buy it. Of course we have a buy it. So one buy it. For me, it is a buy it. In fact, I've bought it. I've actually got it. I bought it to listen to it. So there you go. It is a buy it. So there you go.
Right.
And Kirk, what about yourself?
Yeah, unanimity. I will buy this from the local HMV next time I'm in Stevenage, Newtown, or any other town with a HMV.
Is that the first time we've had all three of us buy an album?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, yeah.
I think it is. There we go. So you said you were the only real positive, most positive one there. So we all bought it. So there you go. Obituary gets a buy it from the ADK channel. So if you like this video, please do like, share, and subscribe. And we will, of course, see you on another video sometime very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.